One Piece has been around for a long time, and during that time, we have seen our boy go from punching sea monsters to splitting skies and fighting dragons. However, after 1,000 chapters, he is still a long way from becoming Pirate King. So, now seems to be a good time to look back at all he's done in order to accurately calculate the physical might of Monkey D. Luffy. So, leave your compass behind, it will only slow us down, raise anchor, and set sail as today we enter the mathematical grand line and calculate over 1,000 chapters worth of incredible feats of power.
The world. What a glorious place. If the endless dream guides your restless spirit, seize it. Raise your flag and stand tall.
Hello Internet, Jojo here, and for over 20 years and 1,000 chapters, we have seen a lot of fantastic things in the world of One Piece. So today, we are not just going to be celebrating One Piece's 1,000th chapter, we will be celebrating it in the only way that seems appropriate for a shonen series of this magnitude. We are going to calculate the power of every relevant standalone feat of Monkey D. Luffy in those 1,000 chapters. Some of these will be recalculations of feats that I did previously, but the majority of them are brand new and incredibly awesome. In this video, we will be moving chronologically and calculating feats that showed up in the order they showed up in the series. We are going to get to talk about several movies and even a game. It's going to be a wild ride. So let's just get into this because it's going to be great. It might surprise you to know that it's actually during the Drum Island arc that Luffy makes his first relevant feat. When Luffy was about to land the final hit on Wapol, he launched his arms back to the edge of the island and then rocketed them back, smacking Wapol off the island. From this panel, we compare the known height of the Drum Rockies, 5,000 meters, and we find this mountaintop is about 2,532 meters wide. So, taking that width, we can find that Luffy is stretching his arms about 73,997 meters. That's over 73 kilometers. Now, here's an interesting thing about Luffy's powers. The more he stretches, the more mass he adds to his arm. His arms don't get thinner, they just maintain their width. So for Luffy to stretch 73,997 meters, and accounting for the fact that his arms are about 2.955 centimeters in radius, his arms must have had a volume of 202 million cubic centimeters. Because humans typically have a density of 1.01 grams per cubic centimeter, this would mean that in this panel, just one of Luffy's arms would weigh about 205,024 kilograms. That is the weight of 37 monster trucks. Luffy then snaps it back at speeds far faster than sound. In the anime, removing some of the scenes that were not in the manga, it takes 7.55 seconds to cover the entire 73 kilometer distance. This would put him at moving 21,924 miles per hour. Now, while Luffy does retract his arm when he makes his attack, it should be noted that the energy does not change. See, while he might lose mass when he retracts his arms, the energy he must have produced to pull his arms in the first place should be transferred to speed as his arms get lighter. That said, the kinetic energy that Luffy must have produced in order to move 205,000 kilograms at the initial 21,000 miles per hour is 2.35 kilotons of TNT for one arm, or 4.7 kilotons of TNT for both arms. However, he has proven to be much faster with the same attack. When Luffy first threw his arms back, it took only 1.37 seconds to reach its full stretch. This would put Luffy moving at over 120,000 miles per hour and would produce 71.48 kilotons of TNT, or 142 kilotons of TNT for both arms. Basically, during Drum Island, Luffy was capable of striking with enough power to level cities. Next is Luffy vs. Crocodile. Remember Alabasta, the arc with a lot of sand? Well, if you do remember it, then you also might remember Pell. Pell is one of the strongest warriors in the nation and even survived this explosion. Of course, this is especially impressive when you realize that he got wrecked and could have been killed by many characters in the series. Characters like both Robin and Crocodile. In fact, Cobra stated that they toyed with him. Now, we all know that Luffy beat Crocodile, and he would have massacred Robin if he had wanted to. So, Luffy must be capable of striking with more energy than this bomb had, as Luffy beat the person who just toyed with Pell. Crocodile says that this explosion is about 5 kilometers in diameter. And looking at the depiction, we can assume that he's talking about the fireball. A bomb with a fireball this large would be worth about 25 megatons of TNT, meaning that Luffy has to be able to strike with over 25 megatons of TNT. That's roughly half the energy of the most powerful ever deployed nuclear bomb. This could level some mountains. This might seem crazy for Luffy to be this powerful at this point in the story, but we can support this by looking at movie 7, the giant mechanical soldier of Karakuri Castle. Now, while it is true that the movies are not canon, I don't care. Let me put it like this. The vast majority of movies, specials, and tie-ins for any series are created with the author's blessing. They are designed to expand upon the characters and the world they live in. So while they are not technically canon to the story, excluding them just because they are not from the official canon is completely unacceptable. Guys, we're not making theory videos or anything like that. We are finding their abilities. So lore actually doesn't matter. As long as the character's abilities or the events of the movie do not directly violate the source material, then why not include them? The character, whoever it is, did the feat. Seriously, we will allow comic book characters to be compared to alternate universe versions of themselves and even take feats from across dozens of authors. So why not use the movies and other material? Of course, I'm not talking about filler, as that is filler. I'm talking about movie specials and tie-ins. Also, games are not part of this unless there's direct involvement from the author, or unless there's some other circumstance, but games will mostly have to be on a case-by-case basis. Of course, there are some strict guidelines that you have to use. The most important of these is that we must treat them as self-contained. This means that scaling to feats from outside the movie, special, and tie-in is a big nope. So if Usopp beats up Luffy in a movie, we could not scale Usopp to main series Luffy. Instead, we would have to compare him to what Luffy has been shown to do in that movie. This is the main guideline, but there are others that are more situational. So as long as the movie does not directly violate canon, we're good to go. So that all said, in this video, we will refer to those feats from the movie, special, and tie-in as battle canon. So, movie 7, Luffy cuts a fortress in half. I don't want to spoil the movie because it's actually pretty good. I mean, the vast majority of the movies are phenomenal. So I'm going to keep away from spoilers. To find the fortress's size, we can compare this fortress in various images to this mech that Luffy hit and this cable that he broke to find that it is about 2,804 meters tall. This fortress also had a base of 3,106 meters, giving it a cross-sectional area of 4,360,000 square meters. Using a shear strength of 50 megapascals, and we find that Luffy would have needed to produce 218 trillion newtons. Displacing this force by the height, and Luffy must have generated 161.87 megatons of TNT. This is over 100 megatons more power than the bomb from Alabasta. Also, this movie is where Luffy first discovered Gear 2nd, making a good argument that this could be considered relatively close to canon. This next feat is one of the 2 feats that change the very landscape of One Piece fights. During the Jaya arc, we have the crew tanking the knock-up stream. This is, by definition, a mountain of water hitting the Going Merry at easily faster than Mach speeds. We know that this spout was more than powerful enough to reach the lowest level of clouds, about 7,000 meters in the sky. Now, the water spout is almost a perfect cone of water, so compare the height of the spout, and we find this cone has a volume of about 1.189 billion cubic meters of water. Considering that saltwater has a density of around 1,025 kilograms per cubic meter, this spout is rocketing up over 1.2 trillion kilograms of water. That is 3,300 times the weight of an aircraft carrier, but it's the speed that makes this powerful. This spout moved 7,000 meters in some undisclosed time. But what time? Now, countless times on this channel, we have found time by calculating the spoken word and empty panels, with the empty panels being worth as much as the spoken word. Typically, we use a speaking pace of 160 words per minute, as that is normal. It takes a single empty panel for the spout to reach its max height. This means that it covered 7,000 meters in 0.375 seconds, putting it over 41,000 miles per hour, or Mach 54. This much mass moving at this speed and accounting for acceleration would have a kinetic energy of 100 gigatons of TNT. Now, of course, while the Going Merry did end up sailing up its side, for the first few seconds or even the first split second, the Going Merry and all the Straw Hats must have tanked all this power. Of course, this might seem like an outlier, but don't worry, it's not, but we'll get to that. You know, why not? I'll go ahead and show you this. During the movie Stampede, the crew and ship survived this explosion. Anyways, as we must move chronologically, the next thing that we're going to talk about is the ancient giants surviving a much more powerful knock-up stream. This knock-up stream is so powerful that it lifted the entire island into the sky. The first thing we need to do is find the size of upper yard so we can compare the base of the spout to where the island was. Comparing inroads to the arc maximum and then the arc to the island, it comes to be about 4,121 meters in length. Taking this width of the island and assuming that it's a cone of water, we find that this spout had to be about 14 billion cubic meters of water, or about 14 trillion kilograms. That is about 9% the weight of Mount Everest. This spout, being about 6,010 meters tall and covering the distance in 0.375 seconds, must have been moving at about 35,800 miles per hour, or Mach 46. This much water moving at this speed would have a kinetic energy of 899 gigatons of TNT. If this wasn't fiction, the inhabitants of the island would have been instantaneously vaporized along with the majority of the water of the stream. But even the unnamed giants tanked this. Because we can assume that Wiper is Kagura 2.0 and Luffy was capable of hurting him, he must be capable of striking with this much power. But even if you don't think that Wiper is Kagura 2.0, you still have to admit that he is much stronger than ancient giants, as those giants were not hardened by 400 years of constant war. So, as of Luffy vs Wiper, Luffy's output was equivalent to 899 gigatons of TNT. But we are not done with Skypiea yet. Next is when Luffy destroyed the Thunder Advent and blasted these clouds away. So, because we just recalculated upper yard size, we can directly compare this to the Thunder Advent and to the thickness of the clouds. The clouds come in at about 762 meters thick, and the Thunder Advent is about 3,229 meters in diameter. We can see that these clouds stretch all the way to the horizon, and we are viewing it from quite a distance up. So, taking the 10,000 meter height of the White Sea and the 2,480 meters of Giant Jack, we get about 3,215 kilometers to the horizon. Taking this distance and the thickness of the clouds, we get a mass of about 24.8744 quadrillion kilograms. That is about 1.56 times the weight of Mount Everest. Now we come to the speed that the clouds are moving at. Last time I calculated this, something didn't sit right with me or with a few of you guys. So I looked at the anime and compared it to the manga. In the anime, it shows the clouds fully dispersed by the time that Usopp begins to yell. So, taking Usopp as our stopping point, we find there are 21 spoken words between Luffy bursting the clouds and the clouds leaving our view in the manga. For the record, I chose not to use the time from the anime, as the anime is notoriously known for bad pacing. There are actually some scenes in the anime that are not in the manga, and there are several moments that we can assume to be happening at the same time. So, using a speaking pace of 160 words per minute, and we find that it took 7.78 seconds for the clouds to fully leave our view. This means that, accounting for acceleration, Luffy generated about 1,013 petatons of TNT. Now, this is quite a bit lower than what I previously calculated, but it makes sense because this is many times stronger than your average unnamed Shandoran, and they all tanked the knock-up stream. This is also a decently low estimate, as this guy says the clouds disappeared. if we were to use the time that it would take for a typical human to track movement, and this feat could be as high as 30.2 Zettatons of TNT. Now, I don't think it's that powerful, but just know that there is a canonical precedent for Luffy to be in the Zetaton range. Next up, we come to Thriller Bark. During Thriller Bark, Luffy and the crew went up against Oars. Oars is known as the continent puller because in ancient times he was known to have, pulled a continent. Now, as to what continent he pulled, we can look at a bit of his legends to get a good estimate. He was well known to having amassed a country of criminals under his control. This is a direct parallel to Australia. Australia is an island, a continent, and was originally a criminal colony, so it would make sense that this is what Oda was referencing when he made Oars. Australia has a land area of 7.692 million square kilometers and an average elevation of 330 meters. However, that elevation is just above the water. You see, Australia's continental shelf is about 200 meters below sea level, so this brings the total depth to 530 meters. Plugging these values into the proper formula, and we get a volume of about 4.076 quadrillion cubic meters. Most rocks and continental crust has a density of about 2,700 kilograms per cubic meter. This means that Oars pulled about 11 quintillion kilograms of rock. This is about 680,000 times the weight of Mount Everest. Now, we don't know exactly how far he pulled, but we can make an educated guess. Oars originally died when he was frozen in the land of ice, so we will assume that he pulled this continent the same distance that divides Australia from Antarctica. The distance from the city of Fremantle to the city of Casey is about 3,823 kilometers. Using this weight, the acceleration of gravity pulling down on the continent, and this distance, we find that Oars must have generated about 98 petatons of TNT. The thing is, Oars' bones and muscles had to be able to withstand this. However, when Oars was fighting the Straw Hats, Luffy was able to shatter his bones quite easily, meaning that Luffy must have struck with far more power than this, likely in the petaton range. Also, let's not forget that Alabasta is not considered a continent, and it's almost as large as Antarctica. So, the standard for continent is much higher in One Piece than it is in the real world. If we assume that the continent that Oars pulled had an area equivalent to that of Alabasta, still an island, he would have needed to pull about 28.9062 quintillion kilograms and generate a power of 259 petatons of TNT. So, the first feat from post-time skip is not quite a normal feat. What makes this feat relevant is not its power, but its precision. The feat that I'm talking about is Luffy's Red Hawk. Luffy first used this punch in the manga and anime when he punched Horty Jones while underwater. Luffy was able to somehow catch his arm on fire while underwater. Now, unlike most other materials, water is not combustible in the slightest, and because of that, we cannot treat this like it's normal. We will have to use the process of water splitting. Water splitting is when so much heat and energy is released into the water itself that the water decomposes into its basic hydrogen and oxygen atoms. Water splitting starts at a temperature of about 4,000 degrees Kelvin or 3,726 degrees Celsius. The specific heat of seawater is about 3.85 joules per gram, and by taking the Straw Hat in this image, we can find that Luffy affected about 17 million grams of water. With these numbers, we find that Luffy generated about 58 tons of TNT in this punch. Now, 58 tons of TNT is not that much in the grand scheme of things, but this attack alone was able to seriously hurt Doflamingo, Horty Jones, Burndy World, Douglas Bullet, and Hold'em. The only time this attack has been resisted when it was blocked by Haki. So, why is that? All of these characters are more than strong enough to not even feel an attack worth only 58 tons of TNT. Well, this is because human blood is mostly water, and this attack is literally splitting molecules and igniting his opponent's blood on fire. So, that said, how fast does Luffy need to be moving to do this? By taking the weight of Luffy's outstretched arm, we can reverse engineer the kinetic energy to find that at his fastest, Luffy should be moving at about 818,000 miles per hour. However, that's not actually how Red Hawk works, because when we first see him using it, it catches fire before it starts moving. This seems impossible, right? But what is it that Gear Second does? Gear 2nd was created in direct response to his loss against Aokiji, the admiral that has the power of cold. Gear 2nd is an anti-admiral ability that causes Luffy's internal temperature to increase and his blood to speed up and begin to boil. From that, it's not hard to make an argument that this heat from Red Hawk comes from his blood moving at, shall we say, very high speeds. Of course, this then brings up another question: how fast would Luffy's blood need to be moving in order to generate this much power? Blood makes up about 7% of the human body's mass, and considering that Luffy weighs about 64 kilograms, he would have about 4.4 kilograms of blood. For 4.4 kilograms to generate 58 tons of TNT, it would have to be moving at 738 miles per hour, and we know that Luffy is forcing his blood at this speed manually by pumping his own heart. So, now that we've explained the Red Hawk, let's move on. In Film Z, Luffy ended up having to go up against and take out the former Marine Black Arm Zephyr. Not only is Z a former admiral, but he's also known for having trained every current captain, vice captain, and admiral. Z is incredibly strong. He is very likely far more skilled than the agents of CP9. Because he's gone rogue, at the start of the movie, he is stealing weapons called Dynastones. These stones are said to rival the ancient weapons, and from what we can see, they certainly do. In his fight with Kizaru, he uses one of these stones to destroy an entire island. This one Dynastone creates an explosion so massive that it eclipses the entire island in a purple explosion, which then activated a volcano explosion. In order to find something we can use to measure with, we can compare the island known as Furs Island to Mount Cleveland in Alaska. We can do this because both seem to be very similar. They are both volcanic and are mostly made of dark rock. So assuming that these volcanoes are similar height, we can take Mount Cleveland's height of 1,730 meters, we can find the distance we are viewing from, and the distance the explosion reached to be about 8.3 kilometers. These stones are known to react to oxygen and then explode, but these are not normal explosions. They appear to be balls of ionized air. We know this because when air is ionized, it becomes a shade of purple, much like the effect of the Dynastones. Plasma ionized air has an energy density of 10 billion joules per cubic meter, and with the explosion radius of 8.3 kilometers, we can find this explosion must have yielded 5.736 teratons of TNT, but we're not done with that yet. This explosion eclipsed the entire island, but when we are given a view from farther away, we see that this explosion is only a tiny part. At first, I thought that this was a different perspective of the same explosion, but it's not. At no time does a purple explosion envelop the entire island in this way, meaning that this explosion is this explosion. So while that is the case, we do get a brief flash of this. This is definitely not the same explosion, as it does not last nearly as long and the timeline is not right, as it comes much later. However, this is still a dome of plasma energy. Overlaying these images, and we can find this explosion had a volume of about 464 trillion cubic meters and an energy of 1,108 teratons of TNT. Yet, even now, we're not done yet. Comparing the explosion to a much larger volcanic explosion, and we find that this one has a radius of 383 kilometers. The thing is, this is a much different type of explosion. It's actually relatively normal. An explosion this large would yield a minimum energy of 1,257,000 megatons of TNT, much less than the other explosion, but still incredibly powerful. Of course, this could be much higher, as this is still a volcano exploding into space, so you have all that mass from the magma being launched at high speeds, but that's more speculation than anything. All this means is that Z tanked a minimum of 1,115.97 teratons of TNT, and that is actually directly in line with other feats from the admirals that I've calculated before. Aokiji's ice is worth about 697 teratons, Ake Inu maxed out at about 2,800 teratons, and Kizaru should be capable of producing this much power, as he is later able to fire lasers all the way through Z. The thing is, Z survived this attack without any serious damage, but more importantly, Z's smasher survived without a scratch. By taking the time that it takes for the Dynastone to ionize all of this air, we find that it is releasing about 105 Teratons per second on average. Z holds this stone for about 3.12 seconds, meaning that Z's C Prism Stone arm can take about 92.14 Gigatons of TNT per square centimeter without even a scratch. So, taking the volume of Z's arm, 889,000 cubic centimeters, and multiplying it by the shear strength, we find that for Luffy to shatter this arm, he must have struck with 81.918 Petatons of TNT. Not nearly as high as when he busted the sky, but still incredibly powerful. Now we move from Battle Canon back to the official material. The next arc after Film Z is the Dressrosa arc. During Dressrosa, Luffy enters a tournament and ends up fighting and beating Don Chinjiao. Luffy beat him with a punch so hard that his skull turned back into a spike. While this alone is basically physics defying, the reason that it is on this list is because Don Chinjiao's head and Haki were strong enough to split an entire continent that is implied to be as hard as diamond. Seriously, they say you can't break it by normal means or melt it with fire. No other material in reality has that kind of strength, as even diamond would still break under this kind of pressure. Taking this panel from his flashback, we find that this broken ice is about 18.17 meters thick. As to its length, well, we know that it's an entire continent, but just not any continent, an ice continent. The only thing we have that's even reminiscent of this in the real world, and is likely what Oda is referencing, is the continent of Antarctica. Antarctica is 5,500 kilometers wide. So, taking the thickness of 18.17 meters, and the area of the break comes in about 99.9 square kilometers. Taking the shear strength of the strongest diamonds, because normal diamonds do break pretty easily, and Don Chinjiao must have struck with about 59.9 quintillion newtons of force. Displacing this force by its 5,500 kilometer length, and this strike must be worth 78.844 Petatons of TNT. Now, we also need to mention again how this is a low estimate, as even the nation of Alabasta is 5,000 kilometers wide, and Alabasta is an island, not a continent. In One Piece, a single continent tends to cover a good portion of the entire globe, i.e. the red line, so it could be far more powerful. However, we will use low estimates here. The thing is, not only can we scale Luffy to Don Chinjiao, we know that Luffy can far surpass him, as Luffy was able to absolutely wreck Don Chinjiao's head, and more importantly, the Haki covering it. Haki, like all metals, has a specific energy per square section that it can take before it fails and the user takes damage. Chinjiao's head has a tip of 3.44 square centimeters, and that means that his Haki can take about 22.919 Petatons of TNT per square centimeter. Chinjiao's head with a spike has a surface area of 18,621 square centimeters. So applying this Haki strength to the surface area that Luffy's punch overpowered, and this strike comes to be worth about 426.8 Exatons of TNT. This is about 400 times greater than when he split the sky. And considering that he was using Gear 3rd, it's actually consistent with his power up during the time skip. And it's consistent with Garp, who busted his head in the first place, as Garp went and fought alongside Gold Roger. Of course, there is potential for it to be much less. So while I think it clearly describes it as being as hard as diamond, as it's called the jeweled ice sheet, fire can't melt it, and weapons can't scratch it, one could say that it is only as hard as blue ice. So, taking blue ice's shear strength of 393 megapascals, and Chinjiao would have needed to produce only 51 teratons of TNT, and Luffy would need about 279.539 petatons of TNT to remodel his head. Now, some of you might be saying that Don Chinjiao was not in his prime, but that doesn't actually matter. The title of Don is earned through power. Being the 12th leader, Don Chinjiao must be stronger than all his predecessors, but weaker than Sai, his successor. We also know that this continent-splitting feat still applies to Chinjiao, as after Sai rebusts his head, he states that Sai could now split it. Actually, depending on the translation, Chinjiao says that Sai could shatter it, and that's worth quite a bit more. Assuming that this continent has a similar volume as Antarctica, though as we already said it would have to be much larger as the One Piece planet is much larger than our own, and Sai should be capable of striking with 4 Exatons of TNT. This is still consistent, as Sai one-shot both Don Qingjiao and Lao Ji, who were on par with each other. So, after Don Qingjiao, we come to Doflamingo. Now, I have already calculated Luffy's power against Doflamingo in a previous video, but I wanted to recalculate it and do it a bit differently, as last time I was scaling all over the place, and it got a bit confusing. I scaled these strings to Law to the mountain cut, then went to Law fought Doflamingo, and etc. Honestly, I got confusingly specific. I got so detailed that I probably missed the forest for the trees.
What is seeing? You're looking, but what you're really doing is filtering, interpreting, searching for meaning.
So this time we're just going to take it easy and just use what these strings have been shown to withstand. And to do that, we first need to find the size of Dressrosa. Now, normally I don't particularly like comparing fictitious cities to other cities in the real world unless there's a direct apparent aesthetic likeness. However, I looked up cities in Spain anyways to see if there's any cities that Dressrosa is obviously based off of. Almost instantly, I found the city of Toledo in the area of Castilla-La Mancha. As you can see, Toledo is almost a perfect Dressrosa looking city. It has a large castle in the middle and is almost an island. The only thing that's missing is the plateau. But what really sold me was that Castilla-La Mancha is the setting for the famous tale Don Quixote. And we all know who Luffy is fighting in this arc, Don Quixote Doflamingo. So, we're going to compare the city of Dressrosa to the city of Toledo. Toledo is not circular, it's more like a starfish. But if we assume that Dressrosa has the same land area, it's just situated in a circle, and this island comes up a land area of 232 square kilometers, and we give Dressrosa a diameter of 171.9 kilometers. Taking that area and comparing it to Fujitori's meteors, and we find that these meteors are about 1,111 meters wide. Such meteors would have a weight of about 2.664 trillion kilograms, and assuming they're moving at Mach speed, 160,000 miles per hour, they would have a kinetic energy of 1,628.7 gigatons of TNT. From this panel, we can find that when compared to the Nidai Katetsu, this thread is about 0.5 centimeters wide. Taking that width and the length of the first string that the meteor would have made contact with, we find this meteor came in contact with about 7,941 square centimeters of string. This means that Doflamingo strings have a shear strength of about 205 megatons of TNT per square centimeter at least. Now, comparing the Straw Hat to Doflamingo strings when he's attacking Luffy, we find that they're about 621 centimeters long, 10.34 centimeters wide, and would have a volume of about 278,538 cubic centimeters. Multiplying the destroyed volume of these strings by 250 megatons per square centimeter, and Luffy's King Kong gun must have struck with 57.12 Teratons of TNT. This is quite a bit less than what we calculated before, but we have not accounted for Doflamingo's Haki. Doflamingo's Haki should be stronger than characters like Don Qingjiao, Sai, and even the former Admiral Black Arm Zephyr, whose famous black arm he is implied to have cut off. So, assuming that Doflamingo's Haki is as low as Don Qingjiao's, and finding the Holy Bullet surface area of 162,000 square centimeters, we discover that for Luffy to overpower his Haki, he had to strike with about 3.734 Zetatons of TNT. And let's not forget, this is also assuming that Doflamingo did not coat every single thread with Haki, something that he could do and would increase his power by many times. If we use the numbers that we calculated for splitting a blue ice continent, and this feat would come to be a total of 244 Exatons of TNT. So using Haki on these strings is about the farthest that we're going to go in this video, but I am going to make a video where I calculate the strength of Conqueror's armament and observation. All types of Haki are overpowered, basically they're anime spider sense, but Conqueror's Haki is on a whole tier by itself. So not only will we be calculating that power, we will also be calculating Luffy's max striking power by way of his armament Haki in that video as well. If you're interested in that, then I suggest that you make sure and subscribe if you haven't yet, and hit that bell icon so you can know when I release this video. Trust me, it's gonna be a good one. Also, if you've gotten this far in the video, then please leave a like and share this. This video was a massive undertaking, so anything like that would help a lot. Like, comment, share, subscribe, make sure you have your notifications on, all that good stuff. Thanks in advance. This next feat comes not from the manga, anime, or a movie, but instead, it comes from a video game. One Piece World Seeker. One Piece World Seeker takes place apparently between Whole Cake and when Luffy got his bounty after that. Of course, That also doesn't explain why Zoro is there, but anyways. This game's story was written by Oda, so it has the same level of what we've been calling battle canon as any of the movies, and more than the anime probably. In this game, Luffy goes up against the warden of the Sky Prison, Isaac. During their final battle, Isaac fights with his anti-admiral armor on. This armor was, as you guessed it, designed to go up against an admiral. While we don't get any specific feats used for scaling of the strength of the armor, we know that Isaac himself, without his armor, was capable of tanking a Dynastone explosion, much like the explosion that Z survived in film Z. By comparing Luffy to this pillar to a larger pillar, and a larger pillar to the Sky Prison, and this comes to have a diameter of 447 meters. Now, we know that the explosion continued to expand after it went off screen, so from the moment the large explosion starts to the moment that it fades off screen is exactly 10.38 seconds. We can find how far it expands per second by comparing it when it is small to it when it's large, and divide that by the time it took. From when the explosion started to right before it went off screen, it moved 4.17 kilometers in 3 seconds. This means that it expands at about 1.39 kilometers per second. So, for a total of 10.38 seconds, this explosion should have a radius of 14.43 kilometers. Because the Dynastone is generating an omnidirectional burst of plasma energy, we can assume that this is giving off energy in a sphere shape, but we just can't see it because it's affecting the water below. A sphere of this size would have a volume of about 12.6 trillion cubic meters, and applying the energy density of plasma, 10 billion joules per cubic meter, we would get an energy yield of 30.144 teratons of TNT. The thing is, Isaac, without his armor, survives this without any noticeable damage, and his anti-admiral armor is, by definition, much stronger. The anti-admiral armor is made up of Sea Prism Stone, the same as Z's arm, and Luffy was able to shatter it in his base form. We already calculated the shear strength of Sea Prism Stone to be about 92.14 gigatons per cubic centimeter at its very lowest. So this means that we just need to find the volume of what I'm going to call the Admiral Buster and multiply it by the shear strength to find how much power Luffy struck with. Comparing Luffy to Isaac's base armor and the base armor to the Admiral Buster, and it's about 4.5 meters tall. Taking this height and assuming a volume of several spheres, this will help account for the fact that the base robot was not destroyed in this punch, and we get a destroyed volume of 15,997,000 cubic centimeters of destroyed Sea Prism Stone. Multiplying that by the shear strength I mentioned before, Luffy would have needed to strike with about 1,474 petatons of TNT. And this is in his base form without Haki, so this power should scale accordingly. While Z is one of the most overpowered characters in the ranks of the Marines, there is another character who essentially embodies the idea of overpowered, as he is so strong that he survived being in the middle of a Buster Call. This man was also on Gold Roger's crew for a little bit, has an awakened Devil Fruit, and is explicitly stated to be on par with Silver's Rayleigh. This is a Demon Air Douglas Bullet. Bullet is so strong that as his introduction, he threw a boat and smashed an entire island to pieces. However, this is not a normal island. This island was tanking a knockup stream without any issue. Your typical knockup stream is so powerful that it's able to launch an island and other pirates into the sky, and this one is no different. Taking the height of Buena Vesta's tower, we find this hole in the middle of Delta Island and the base of the knockup stream is about 3,294 meters. We can then take that and find that the entire island is about 16,697 meters wide. Using that and comparing it to this frame, we find the knockup stream reached a height of over 78 kilometers high. It hits this distance in 1.74 seconds. This would put it moving at about 100,000 miles per hour. Taking this stream's base and height, we find that it would have a volume of about 671 billion cubic meters, basically making this a literal mountain. Seawater has a density of about 1,025 kilograms per cubic meter and would give this spout a mass of about 687.7 trillion kilograms. That is 4.2 times heavier than Mount Everest. Now, imagine 4 Mount Everest hitting you at over 100,000 miles per hour. That is the kind of energy that this island is taking at any given moment. It would have an energy of 168.2 teratons of TNT, and the island doesn't break. Considering that the spout goes from 0 to max speed in only 0.09 seconds, it must have had an acceleration of over 1.649 million meters per second squared. This much mass and acceleration would yield a force of 1.13436 sextillion newtons of force. Now, as the island is about 3,294 meters in diameter, its base should have a surface area of about 8,520,000 square meters. Dividing this force by the area, and this island should be able to take about 133 million megapascals. This means that this island is 2,600,000 times stronger than granite, and makes this seem far more impressive. Using the diameter to find the height and then the volume, we found that for Bullet to start to break this island as he did, this boat must have struck with 104 petatons of TNT. But that's just one feat that Bullet did casually. When the boat lands, Bullet uses his powers to make it explode, and this explosion is so massive that it easily overpowers the power of the knock-up stream. This means that the pressure wave of this explosion must be able to generate a minimum of 1,331,000,000 bars of pressure. An explosion with that much pressure would have to be worth a minimum of 258.88 petatons of TNT. The thing is, literally everyone is fine. The Sunny is not damaged, Nami is not hurt, unnamed characters survive, and they're fine. This is also consistent that characters like Nami, Usopp, and Chopper tanked Big Mom's Conqueror's Haki. Usopp has tanked hits from Luffy post Skypiea, and they were all in the middle of Kuma's explosion. Frankie survived this, and let's be honest here, Usopp is a master of getting hurt at this point. He gets hurt so many times, so many different ways, and he just survives. Usopp is insane. The last feat that we are going to talk about in this video is the final clash between Luffy and Bullet. Bullet had used his powers to make this arm huge and then cover it with Haki. Now, Bullet's size as a giant in comparison to the island as well as the size of the island itself is inconsistent at best, and because of that we have to look for something else in order to find his height. Now, generally, in fiction there are only three things that you can take as consistent: the speed of light, the height of characters, and gravity. Those three things, barring any sort of outside effects, are going to be the most consistent things that you have. For this, we're going to take how long it takes for Bullet's arm to fall to the ground after it gets cut off. Starting from shoulder height, this arm falls for 76.05 seconds. This time would mean that it fell about 28 kilometers. Now, there are a few factors that are not accounted for, so we will lowball this and take this as the entire giant's height instead of the distance from the shoulder to the ground, and I'll also round down a little bit. Using this height, we can find that this fist has a volume of 91.48 trillion cubic meters of metal. Applying the density of steel to this volume, and it must weigh 736.43 quadrillion kilograms. That is about 1,070 times heavier than the water spout. Bullet's arm is about 85,604 meters long, and when he clashes with Luffy, he throws it to its max extension. Assuming these two scenes are happening at the same time, Bullet punched in 0.98 seconds, putting him at a speed of 23,582 miles per hour. However, when they clash, Luffy's punch causes his to decelerate to 0 in 0.04 seconds. This means that both characters must have felt approximately 795.978 sextillion newtons of force. That is like having the moon dropped on top of you. Luffy then blasts this force back through Bullet's arm, shattering it in the process, displacing this force by the length of Bullet's arm, and we find that Luffy must have struck with 16.28559 exatons of TNT. Not quite the earth-shaking power of some of his actual canon feats, but it's still incredibly powerful. We should also note that Bullet's Haki is easily comparable to Don Chinjiao, but it is best to treat feats from the movies as separate from feats from the source material. With that, we have finished calculating every relevant feat from the start of One Piece all the way to or past chapter 1000 of One Piece. Sweet. Guys, as you can definitely tell, I hope, this video was a huge endeavor, so if you enjoyed it, please leave a like, comment, share something nice, and subscribe if you haven't done it yet. I know that many of you are not subscribed, and honestly that's just not efficient. So make sure that you do that and have notifications on so that you don't miss out on future videos. That said guys, thanks for watching, remember to stay spectacular, JoJo, out.
俺はやるんだ海賊王に俺はなる